Maphis from Tallahassee, Florida, and I've been growing camellias for 53 years. Tonight, mostly I'm going to talk about grafting. And I've been grafting for most of those 53 years. And up until 2013, I was getting about 15 to 20%. When I got 20%, I had a banner year. Then in 2013, I talked to John Wong in California, and this is him. I asked him to come and be our keynote speaker at the convention, and he had a lot of new ones, and so I grafted some to sell at this convention. This program that you see here, we sold ads in the program and made $14,000. We sold plants at the convention, a lot of them that he had originated that nobody had ever seen, and we made over $7,500. This man's name is John Wong. For 40 years, he has worked on producing yellow camellias, fragrant camellias, and now he has been working on white reticulatas. He saw this bloom in my greenhouse in 2015 when he came. This is fine pure. It's very large. It was over 7 inches when he came. He also saw Holy Pure, which is really, really winning now. He saw it in the greenhouse at the same time. Oh, this is another picture of Holy Pure, along with Nansang Purple Jade. This is a small to medium reticulata, which is a different species. Okay, and you can see the bricks on the bottom of my greenhouse there, and they were sitting down the middle when he came. And a lot of people had asked John Wong, and his name is spelled W-A-N-G, Wong. He is Mandarin Chinese. They asked him for his hybrids. I mean, lots of people all over the United States. He had been sending them to China, and he had sent a few to Gene Phillips up in Savannah. But I wrote him a letter and asked him would he send them to me, and he sent them to me. They just came the next week. So when I called him and we paid him to come to our convention, we paid his airplane ticket, we paid for his meals, we paid for his hotel, we paid for everything. When he came, I asked him, I said, John, why did you send me your hybrids when you have not shared them with anybody else? And he looked at me and he says, don't know, you could be crook. So I appreciated that. Now I have about 50 of his hybrids, but there's only about 8 or 10 of them registered. He has not registered anymore since we did the earlier ones. And these 3 that I've showed you are registered now. This is the same thing. This is just a close-up picture. This is a small flower. Now, his hybrids are 3/4 japonica, which means that they will grow where you are. They will live outside. Most reticulatas will not grow where you are outside at all. They will die. When the temperature goes under about 22 degrees, they die. But the japonicas will live. I have a son-in-law that just moved from McLean, Virginia, and he had one next to his trash can that has been there for, I know, 15 years, and it's a white japonica. Okay, I originally got my start grafting camellias with Dick and Roberta Hardison. They lived about 3/4 of a mile from me, and I went down to his place to buy some azaleas, and he was growing camellias under pine trees, and he was selling camellia plants for $5 and $7. He graduated from the University of Tennessee, and he with a degree, and he went to the University of Florida and got a degree in bacteriology. Then he went to some foreign country out across the land called Berkeley, and he got his in immunology, and he worked with the health department, and he wrote all the health department regulations for the seafood industry in Florida. So I started learning to graft, and he taught me to graft way back in 1981. This is the camellia that is named for Dick Hardison, and it is a pretty thing. It is a japonica, and it is a medium to large flower. This is the variegated form of Dick Hardison, and it is a pretty thing too. This is Roberta Hardison. This was named for his wife. It's also a double formal. Both of these flowers have won shows. This is Paul Gilly from Grand Ridge, Florida, my hometown, and he grew camellias, and he's registered about 50 or 60, and he's been dead since about 1985. Okay, he was a peanut farmer that grew camellias under pecan trees, and he grafted in the ground, and he grafted in November, December, and then he would dig them up in September and then sell the grafts for $7. When I sell a graft, it's $60 now. Times have changed a little bit. Okay, so when I started grafting camellias, I was grafting in pots. Mr. Hardison was grafted in pots, and E. Hewlett Smith was grafting in pots, and we was getting about 15%. This is one by Paul Gilly. This is, it's bad to get old. I'll think of it in a minute. I think it's Minnie Ruth, and it's a variegated camellia, which means it's got white in it, and it has a very good virus. The first camellia show that I went to was about 1984 or 85. I went to Valdosta, Georgia with Dick Hardison, and this flower, Rena Swick variegated, won the show that year in Valdosta. This is also another picture of Rena Swick variegated. And Hewlett Smith, the past president of the American Camellia Society, who passed away in 2010, he always called it Fancy Rena. This is him. And he is on the tablet of honor at the American Camellia Society, and he is holding Ray Gentry. This picture was taken by a man from South Carolina, and he took it in Gainesville. This was in the early 90s, but this is Ray Gentry, beautiful camellia. This is the flower Hewlett Smith that was named by Frank Purcell in Oakland, California in the 80s, and it is a large reticulata, beautiful flower. Okay, in 2000, I bought a lot, okay, from my house, and I had about 350 camellias in the ground at my house, but there's one problem. Every year when the winter came, all the buds on the reticulatas would fall off because it was too cold, because the weather was different then. It was colder. It was colder. So we bought 3.66 acres, and the first thing I built was a chicken yard. I built a chicken yard. You can see the chicken house, and I bought a bunch of fancy bantams, and pretty soon, instead of 20 chickens, I got 400 chickens, and they kept reproducing, and I kept setting the eggs, and then I had to give them all away. And so we built 2 greenhouses here, and this is what the greenhouses look like. It's got a 12-foot bed on one side and an 8-foot bed on the other, and they're 96 foot long, and we put the camellias in. And in the background of the chicken yard, you can see some of the camellias that I had dug at the other place and put them at where we lived before, and to put them in. So I started grafting the reticulatas, because reticulatas have to be grafted. Now, the John Wong reticulatas, which are 3/4 japonica, they will root, and Tommy Alden in Byron, Georgia is rooting them. He has rooted Fine Pure and Holy Pure, Butterfly Spring, Zuquan Lady, a bunch of them. Evening Glow Pearl, those are all John Wongs. Okay, look at the pot in the middle here. I put my cursor on it where you can see it. That's what I was grafting in, and then I remembered that Paul Gilly, this man right here, he grafted in the ground. Okay, and so I talked to Hewlett Smith about it, and so we decided to put in some plants on the inside of my bed, and you can see I've got plants already planted. This is 3 or 4 years after 2001. I grafted, and you can see my grafts did really, really good. You know, I had a take rate of about 60%. After that, I got real smart. I put me another board in along this walkway right here, put pine bark in it, put a bunch of plants in there, and grafted in there. But they were poor plants when I put in. I've learned something about grafting. You have to have clean rootstock, and you have to have clean signs or cuttings to graft. Clean by that I mean that you spray with fungicide and you don't have fungus, and you're like a doctor when you start grafting. You have to be really clean with everything. You have to dip everything in fungicide. So my success rate went up, and then Hewlin Smith, I was talking to him about it, and so he decided that he would do him a raised bed. See, this is another one of the raised bed. So Hewlin Smith put him in some cross ties in Valdosta, Georgia, and he put some plants in it, and he started grafting in the ground, and his success rate went up. Before, in potted plants, we were using about 80% bark. Bark is a terrible thing to graft in. There's something missing in it. I don't know what it is, but plants get too wet, too dry, too hot, too cold, and there's a lot of stress. Hewlin Smith experimented with everything, including red cups. When he passed away, he had gone to the beds like this. And in 2010, when he passed away, he was growing camellias on Kumagai Nagoya. Look how straight these rootstocks are. Look, there's no dieback cankers, there's nothing on them. And so we grafted here for 1 year. The next year he passes away and his grafts we go dig them. This is what his beds looked like the year he passed away. Okay, we dug these, okay, and sold them and gave them to people. This is what his backyard looked like when he passed away. Okay, I got the idea that I'd put me in some raised beds, and so my raised beds from side to side are 24 inches. I have screened topsoil in the bed, nothing else. I just sprayed Roundup on the ground, put in 2x10s, cleated them together in the middle. This bed is 60 foot long, this bed is 60 foot long, and I put Kumagai Nagoya cuttings in. Kumagai Nagoya is really, really good to graft on because it grows about 4 or 5 times, and I'm going to show you in a little while. It's faster than everything. It will flush if you keep the fertilizer to it about 5 times a year. The average camellia flushes twice. You will have if you root a Sasanqua, after 1 year you'll have a root on it that's about 4 to 5 inches across. On a Japonica, it will be 5 to 6 inches across, and on a Kumagai Nagoya, it will be 10 to 12 inches across. And remember, on a camellia or any tree, whatever you got on top, you got roots down there to feed that top. And y'all were talking about deer a while ago. You see the agapanthus on the right here under these trees? The deer keep them eat off. I've got 6 or 8 deer that come through here all the time. And so I have to spray my new grafts to keep the deer from eating them, or do what I'm going to show you later on. Okay, the first year I didn't have anything to put in, so what did I do? I put in lettuce and turnips and mustard, things like that. The wife really liked that. And notice I didn't have, on the left here, you can see the agapanthus and you see native azaleas here. You can see the gold ones here. This whole bed is a huge bed of native azaleas. Okay, that's what it's just 2x10s screwed together with a little bracket on the side. Then every once in a while I have a pipe right there. Okay, when I made it, I put little boards across it to hold the sides until I put this in and to hold everything out. When I filled the dirt in, I took the little pieces up of that. Okay, now you notice that this bed is planted out. These are 2 years old, and I started grafting on them. This one was built second, and I put cuttings in it later on. Now I have a third bed over here and 2 at the other end. Now I got 5 beds outside, and I got 3 beds inside, but I'll show you those in a little while. Okay, these I have grafted. Okay, notice all the fertilizer. Always before, we did not fertilize at all for the first year, and we shaded everything. Notice there's nothing shaded here. Okay, look at the fertilizer along there. Okay, almost every one of them are growing. Mark Crawford in Valdosta, Georgia, I would get gallon cuttings of Kumagai, and then I would put them in the bed. You know, I'd take a post hole diggers and put them every 9 inches and put them in a 60-foot bed. You could put 144 plants. This is the ones that were in the pot. This is right after I put them in on 8-inch or 9-inch centers all down that bed. Kumagai grows really, really fast. If you keep it fertilized, they keep growing. If the fertilizer runs out of kumagai in May or June, they put on buds and they quit growing. So immediately, as soon as I see buds, I break all the buds off, okay? Then I fertilize them good and they keep growing and getting bigger, okay? This is after 1 year here. These are 2 years, and that's where I grafted. This man I learned a lot about grafting from. This is Jim Smelly. I saw him last Saturday. I went and had lunch. I had dinner with him. I had breakfast with him. And then I had lunch with him. We had fried catfish at Aunt Jenny's, which was a country thing. Jim Smelly in Lucedale, Mississippi has 5 greenhouses, and he grows tons of really, really great daylilies. This is the flower Jim Smelly. It is curtain call seedling, and he crossed Pleasant Memories with it. This flower was probably the best picture that I ever took of a camellia. This bloom was over 9 inches across. It was huge. This is the same cross, named for his wife. She passed away the year that this flower was taken. These 2 blooms are unjibbed, and they're over 12 inches. This is Elaine, not Elaine Smelly. There's a flower called Elaine Smelly, but this is just Elaine. Okay, this is where I grafted that first year. Okay, I took all the pine straw that I had put in the bed out, and I put pine straw in to hold the fertilizer where the fertilizer don't bounce out when it rains and when I water. And notice the water is the soaker hoses. And I put sand down enough to hold the cup. I grafted them. I cut them off and grafted them, stuck the cup on them. And then, later I will go into what happens after that. Okay. Now, notice this cutting, this sign is cut off, and I cut the terminal bud off. Okay, and it grew right here because camellias are apex dominant, but I was lucky this one grew twice. Okay, when I started grafting, I would take a cup, and when the bud it gets this size, I put 1 hole in the cup with a pencil, and I would put it in the top. But I've since learned to put that hole right here, and I'll show you that in a little while. But Jim Smelly was using this cup system. Okay. All right, that's what's my hole. This is when it grows like, when it gets like this, when I graft, I dip everything in Captan. I pour Captan on it. After 1 month, I spray the graft with Pristine fungicide. Pristine or Paget, they're the same thing. When they're this size, I spray them again when they start through the top of that cup. Or here, what I did is I put numerous holes in the cup. What I do now is I put a bigger hole down here. I don't put these in the end. When it's like this is Big Apple. That's one, I'll show you Big Apple in a little while and tell you the story with it. Big Apple is really, really hard to grow. Really hard to grow. But it is a gorgeous bloom. Notice the pine straw here to hold the sand. It holds the sand, it holds the fertilizer, and you can see the little balls of fertilizer down here, the little yellow balls down here. This is E. Hewlin Smith and Mark Crawford. This is in 2009. Okay, this is Janet Smith, flower name for her. This is Mandy Smith and Renee. This is 2 of his 3 daughters. Okay, this is Mark Crawford that owns Lock Laurel Nursery in Valdosta, Georgia. He is a plant pathologist and a very good grocer, a very good camellia grower. Okay, now instead of doing the hole bigger here when it starts to grow, I put it down here. Okay, see it? That's the same one. It's old Big Apple and it's growing. And when it gets like this, the 1st of May, I take the cup off of it. Now, why do I put the holes in it? For years and years, I'd wait for it to get this size. I would take the jug or whatever I had on it, and then it would wilt. It would wilt because the humidity in whatever I covered it with was 100%. But if you put a single hole in it like this, then you let that humidity out, and the stoma and the bottoms of the leaf that let the water in and out, they start letting water in and out, and the cuttings never wilt. See, when the leaves get about this size, I take the whole top out of the cup. Okay, I do not shade at all. The 1st of May, I take all the cups off. If the sign is growing, I take the cups off. If the sign's not growing, I take the cup off and I cut the top bud off. There's something wrong with it, so I defer to the next eye. Sometimes when the wind starts to blowing in March, I may cheat a little bit and put an extra cup on it for a day or two. This is where I put the hole in the side. This is where I make the hole bigger. That's where I make it really big. And then this is the 1st of May when I take the top off of all the grafts. And notice, about 90% of them have taken. Notice the plants on the right. This is the 2nd year. Notice the plants on the right have gotten a lot bigger. This is what they look like in June. This is what they look like in July. They are about 36 to 48 inches tall. These reticulatas grow really, really fast. They do. This is the plants that I grafted last year, and I put them in pots, and they're waiting to either be sold or go to one of the projects the Camellia Society is doing. Notice, I'm going to start to dig these grafts. Now, here I was digging with a shovel. I no longer dig with a shovel because I cut roots when I dig with a shovel. I dig with a potato rake. I stick that potato rake down in the ground. It's got like 8 or 9 inch little prongs on it, and I pop them out of the ground. And when you pop them out of the ground, they look like that. Now, these were put in as gallon pots, okay? And notice they have grown. This is my friend Howard Rhodes, and notice he has 2 grafts right there, and you can tell they're pretty good sized grafts. When I started grafting, if a graft was 10 inches tall the 1st year, I thought I was the man. I thought I was the man. And notice, these are 40 to 48 inches tall grafts. Now, Hewlin Smith, before, he had a friend that lived in Ocala, Florida, and he would graft for Hewlin, and Hewlin would take me and Mark Crawford and Howard Rhodes and a bunch of us and go down and dig those grafts one day. Now that continues today. People come here. I did 550 grafts last year. I got over 500 to take, and we dug almost 500 and put them in pots, and these gentlemen came and helped me dig them this year. Notice the potato rake right here is different. Once you dig all the grafts, you can see I'm almost got it all dug here. I put them in these little houses here because with a shovel, I cut some of the roots. This is my potting table, and I move this table to where the grafts are. And one thing, when I graft, I put it as far away from my greenhouse and the other camellias as possible. This is what the grafts look like in the greenhouse. I no longer put them in a greenhouse because I dig them differently. This is that 2nd year when I grafted out in the garden. Okay, these were all in the ground in the garden. And this is how they grew the 1st year. This is what the plants look. Notice I put little cages on them to keep the wind from blowing them over. Okay, now this is a different thing. Notice, this is a graft that failed. Notice I grafted the sign up here at the top of this stump. The sign died. The stump came out right here, and this was really, really, really tender growth. I mean, this was still fleshy growth. I cut it off with a razor blade, then I grafted a little sign in it. The same year that this graft was done here. Very unusual. This is Big Apple. After 3 months, you can see it's growing. It's growing. You got one stem all the way up here, and you got another sign growing right here. See, this is a few weeks later. Another close-up. This is what it looked like in June. This is in July. Notice, you can still see where I grafted originally, but this is a new graft right here. This is Big Apple. Big Apple, remember I told you, it's really hard to grow. This is what it looked like before we dug it. Now, when I went to a camellia show, I had this flower. This is Nidra and Maphis variegated. And I just knew that this flower was going to win the show. I had never seen one this pretty before. It was a totally different color. And we went to Nidra and Mathis's home show in Douglas, Georgia, with her husband, Clayton Maphis. And Clayton Maphis, I called him on the phone on Thursday, and I said, Clayton, he was a high school coach and principal, and I asked him, I said, how many tables do you have for reticulatas? Howard Rhodes and I and Steve Lawrence, which we still have greenhouses here in Tallahassee. There's 6 greenhouses here now. I said, how many tables do you have for reticulatas? He said, we have 2 tables. I said, well, this is Thursday, so you better find you about 8 more tables. I carried over 250 just reticulatas, most of them over 6 inches. Okay, I just knew I had this show won with this Nidra and Maphis variegated until Howard Rhodes, the guy holding the 2 grafts a while ago, showed up with Big Apple. He bloomed Big Apple, and he handed me my hat, buddy. That was one of the prettiest flowers I have ever seen. Big Apple's a gorgeous thing. I have grown it ever since then. I have never bloomed it. I cannot keep it alive. I have 2 plants now that are big enough to bloom, and they got buds on them, and they might bloom this year. But now remember, this is 15 years ago about 15 years ago. Okay, now when you dig them with a shovel, what you do with the roots is you cut the ends off of them. And when you cut the ends off, you know, you got 2 kinds of roots. You got support roots, and that's what all these big boys are. And then at the end of all the stems, you have feeder roots that feed the plant. Notice, I cut these. I dug them in November, and what happened to them? They died. So now I use that potato rake, and I never cut a root. I stick the potato rake underneath there. I loosen the soil, and then I put my hands underneath there and work the dirt away from every root. Out of almost 500, I cut a root on 5 last year. 5. And I sent them to Mark Crawford's to put them in the mist to keep them from dying. Okay? Now, when you cover camellias, you can cover with a styrofoam cup, a bleach jug, a little one, a big one, a dark jug. This was from Public Supermarkets. Icing came in this. You know, this is a 5-gallon bucket, 3-gallon bucket, 2-gallon bucket. All of these will cover camellias really, really good. Okay, all of these work really good. Don't use these. This is an ice cream thing. This is a light colored milk jug. This is a light colored, they will burn underneath there. Do not use those. Okay, this is another year. Notice, I got a new bed down here at the end. Okay, I hadn't put the other one in over here yet. This is when they're starting to grow and they're just coming out the top. So this has got to be the 1st of May. It's got to be the 1st of April before they start growing. Okay, now you can see 5 beds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This last year, I grafted 550 in these 3 beds. This year, I have grafted on this end, and in the garden I'll show you in a little while. I grafted on the ones that I had dug the year before from here. This is Jim Smelly. I went to his place to graft, and these are Winter Joy, which is a camellia that will grow, that was developed for where you live up there, and they grow. It's a cold hardy camellia, and so I grafted on them. He told me to come and graft 100 at his place. This is in 2017. After 4 months, this is what some of them look like. This is Ray Gentry variegated. Notice every one of them took. This is in the open field in the open sunshine. This is Elaine after 2 months. This is Ray Gentry again. This is Marilyn Maphis. Notice, this is Marilyn Maphis. They're waist high, and this is in July. And we dug them in November. Another picture. Another picture. This is Ray Gentry variegated. Notice all the virus in this thing. That is a beautiful flower. This is Marilyn Maphis just before we dug them. All right, now, I went outside day before yesterday. Notice, this is a raised bed in my garden. These Kumagai Nagoya are tall as my head, and they've only been there 2 years. 2 years. Notice all the amaryllis along here, all along the front of this bed. I found out that when you grow amaryllis, they need some shade. And daylilies, they need some shade in order to get really big. I put these amaryllis in a year ago. That I had them in pots. My son dug them, and the bulbs were the size of my thumb. After 1 year, most of them are 3 inches across. They're that big. That's these Kumagai that never stop growing, because this is in my grandson's vegetable garden. And I know if you've read the ACCS journal and the yearbook from last year, you saw about my grandson. Okay, I went out at 8 o'clock and I cut all of these Kumagais off, half of them. I cut 80 of them off. J.D. Thomerson's going to come and help me graft. Notice the mustard greens. Notice the raised bed over here. Okay, after this is at a little after 8 o'clock. Notice I just put sand down, okay, to hold those cups. And then J.D., I sawed them off at about 2 to 3 inches. And this is J.D. Thomerson. He is the editor of the ACCS journal and a great writer. And so he is collecting them for me to graft them. Okay, notice the vegetables again. By the way, the raised bed up here, that's weeds. That's not. Okay, so yesterday we grafted 80. We grafted 78 in this bed. The last 4 or 5 right here, I grafted after he left. Notice we put sand around them to hold the cups. Okay, put sand on top to shade them just a little bit. But this is in the open sun. Now, my other beds where I'm growing in raised bed are over here, way over here on this part of the lot. My greenhouses are off to the right. Okay, notice the wire. This is rabbit wire or hog wire. I put it down to keep the rabbit out, and then I put strands above that to keep the deer out, because the deer are eating everything. And then I discovered, after I got lettuce on the other side of here, I discovered that the little baby rabbits are coming through the wire. And so I had to put chicken wire around the outside all the way for the baby rabbits to stay out of the garden. You can see this is carrots right here. This is cabbage and spinach, okay? And this is JD, what he's doing the raised beds. Now, let me tell you, there's a new grafting video on the American Camellia Society website where we talk a lot about this, okay? About grafting and raised beds and all that. There's also a Zoom program on raising camellias and grafting where we go into a lot more detail with the fungicides. It's called Everything I Ever Learned About Growing Camellias. I might have given that program to you guys. I don't remember. I've given so many of them now, but they're all on the American Camellia Society website. Richard and them are doing a great job of posting full-length videos on the website. This is Marilyn Maphis. That is a gorgeous flower. And that's Marilyn Maphis.
Okay.
Only she's a little bit older now, just a little bit. Do we have any questions?
It's an older picture.
You're going to send them when you're 15.
Richard, you probably need to unmute everybody where they can ask questions.
And unmute.
Oh, okay. I'll unmute people.